The question of why she builds him up, Buttercup, has never been answered. We're going to have someone to answer that eventually. Welcome to the Scary Alvarez Podcast. I'm, of course, Scary Alvarez, wine island enjoyer, sherry wine destroyer, Jake's grandpa, and Cindy's plus one when she'll have me. And I'm excited today to welcome Evan Flood to the podcast, a gentleman who way too many of you all click refresh on waiting for Badger recruiting updates. That's a compliment. I hope you take it as one. Welcome aboard, Evan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I was a little disappointed after Thursday's episode that you did. I thought there was always a small part of me that thought maybe you were really Barry Alvarez. So to see you two on the same screen, a little bit of a heartbreaker there.
Evan, I don't understand the question. You know, we are the same person. That's just the magic of technology, buddy. That's how.
I know. I just thought maybe there was. I mean, Barry Alvarez got to be on Twitter somewhere, right? I thought maybe. Yeah. I mean, until you did the podcast, there was no way of knowing for sure.
Well, maybe I appreciate that you. Yeah. I appreciate that you appreciate my work both as a coach, athletic director, and podcaster. I know that it was mind blowing for everyone who saw that podcast yesterday and today to finally see both of us at the same time, and that was. But let's be honest here. Cindy ran that podcast. It was pretty obvious.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of it. She definitely, I think, runs that household. Is fair to say. Usually, I didn't expect that from Barry. I thought Barry would be the more vocal one. She had the most interesting stuff on there.
Well, Bill, Barry, me, obviously a very powerful brand and man. But I'm also smart enough to know when you can step aside and let the person run things that should be. And Cindy did a great job. I appreciate it. She's my plus one in life, as I've told you. Obviously you were a brave man, following the Barry Alvarez episode. I think it's fair to say you didn't know that would be happening when you accepted. But this is the one where the all-time grossing movie, Barbie and the Ken sequel. Which that's pretty good.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, I believe in you, Evan. I believe in you. Well, you're the first journalist / recruiting guy that I've had on the podcast. What's it like knowing that if you were PJ Fleck, you would immediately make a ring after hearing me say that?
Can you rephrase that?
Nope.
What's it like knowing?
Well, I mean, it's fine. It's a PJ Fleck joke. We'll have other ones, but basically, what I'm trying to get my listener is some insight into the recruiting process and the stuff that you do, because obviously we all see the end result when someone commits or if there's a crystal ball or something like that. But the blood and guts kind of make the sausage stuff that goes into that. I'm very curious about. So, I kind of want to get some insight on that. So for the few Badger fans who don't know who you are and what you do, please, give us a rundown of what your day-to-day work is like, pretending like you're in a job interview for rivals and they're trying to poach you.
Okay. Yeah. So right now for 24/7 Sports Wisconsin, I cover all aspects. That's football, basketball. I shouldn't say all aspects, but the big two sports, football, basketball. In recruiting in both sports, and based on how we run things, obviously, we're trying to sell subscriptions, but you balance that with team coverage as well. So I try and go 50-50 as much as possible. I think more people follow me or enjoy me for my recruiting coverage. That's what I came up with back before we were bought by CBS Sports, and that's we were probably closer to 75-25, maybe 85-15 in there. So there's a balancing act of keeping the subscribers happy and giving them something to pay for. It's obviously not easy in today's climate to get people to pay for stuff like this. So you want to make it worth their while, but at the same time, we do have to throw in a lot of team coverage to be a complete site and drive traffic, as well as sometimes that stuff can lead to subscriptions as well. But so I try to cover all aspects as much as possible. Obviously, being one guy on the site right now, there's only so much I can do until we get Nick Olson on board here this weekend, so we can do a little more. But so I'm stretched a little thin, but try and keep it 50-50, just in terms of getting, the VIP content that people pay for, as well as getting, a lot of the free coverage stuff, going to the games, going to practices, interviews during the week, stuff like that. And, there's so many outlets these days. The struggle is, trying to do something different than anybody else is doing, even though we're all at the same stuff. So try and keep it as unique as possible over there as we can.
We seem to have a pretty robust crowd, and let's be honest here. Given a free year at Paramount Plus, it wasn't a bad idea. I mean, I don't know if you knew that was happening, or you're the one who greenlighted that, but that's a pretty sweet offer.
Yeah, that's for every site. I don't know. That's not really my thing to do. Is that big to people? I have no idea. I don't use it.
Yeah, I don't know. We recently went over. You'll probably see this if you watch the whole podcast, but who would play Barry Alvarez in the Barry Alvarez story, and
Yeah.
Gandolfini, unfortunately, he's passed away now, but that was the popular pick.
Who is James Gandolfini?
Yeah, the Sopranos guy.
Soprano. Oh, okay.
Tony Soprano.
I know who it is. Yeah.
Yeah, he would have had he survived to play that role, though. He would have been known as the Barry Alvarez story guy, not the Sopranos guy.
That's a good one.
Yeah, for sure. So this is very curious because obviously, recruiting is a unique animal that very few people understand. So is getting scoops about recruiting. I think that is obviously a big part of what y'all are selling there with the crystal balls and such.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously I'm not asking all the details about how the sausage gets made, but generally speaking, how do you get your sources? Is it, players, families, weird dudes in conversion vans selling Rolex knockoffs? I mean, how do you do that? Just kind of generally.
Definitely not that one. It's a combination. There are people within the team that kind of handle that stuff for the coaching staff, parents. Sometimes the kids will confide in you. That used to be the way it used to be done before Twitter and social media and all this. Before that, they needed people like us to get stuff out there, and you kind of got it from the kids more than anything. Now they got, a lot of them have bigger followings than we do. They don't need us anymore, right. And they can kind of run the show there in terms of reporting anything they want to report. But it's a mixture. It all depends on the situation. You try and get 2 to 3, sources for maybe every recruitment Wisconsin's in deep with, because at the end of the day, people are only going to tell you what they want out there for the most part, or, when they don't tell you, or they tell you to, keep it on the down low, which is, fine, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to sell subscriptions that way by, keeping your mouth shut. So, families, the kids themselves, or sources within the team, it's kind of a balancing act between all three.
Yeah, I get it. So, you and I obviously this is some secret, state secret. That's no problem. But, how do you balance? I presume you're a Wisconsin fan. Is that correct? That's kind of part of why you got into this.
I grew up a Wisconsin fan. I mean, really, when you get into this, you kind of get away from that. I always kind of find it funny when people, usually from other fan bases, kind of take shots at you for like a homer and all that. It's like, I almost don't care who wins or loses at this point, especially when you get into like basketball season and, they're in the tournament and you're like, I don't want them to win. I mean, I'm not rooting against them, but it's like, I'm on almost vacation as soon as their season's over. There's no baseball at Wisconsin. Like I'm in the free and clear. The quicker they're done in the tournament. I mean, there's some part of it, like especially with basketball, with my other job. I kind of know these kids. When they're almost before high school. Sometimes, like Johnny Davis, I've been watching since he was in 4th or 5th grade. I mean, so from that aspect, you want to see them do well and succeed and stuff like that. But, once you get into the job and you get close to the team like this after a couple years, it becomes a job. Like you're not sitting there cheering in the press box or anything like that. I mean,
no,
I grew up a Wisconsin fan. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in 20 minutes from Madison. if I had a team, if I quit tomorrow, that's who I'd be cheering for. But once you're in it, like you really just kind of get away from that. I don't know if that's believable or not to people, but that's.
No, I mean you're being real. You're being real. I mean, I wasn't suggesting an answer. So you mentioned another job. Did I miss something there? Do you have two different gigs?
Yeah, I work for Prep Hoops Wisconsin too on the side. So scout for the high schools in Wisconsin. We work with the colleges to help get those guys recruited too. So it's a nice gig because, like I said, I don't have baseball for Wisconsin. So all these kids are playing in the spring and summer with their AAU teams. So I get to kind of cover that nationally and follow them around too, and kills two birds with one stone too, because a lot of the guys I cross paths with are being recruited by the Badgers, so works out really well.
What got you into that specific line of work? I presume it's not the unique smell of high school gymnasiums during the winter.
No, I was actually covering a AAU tournament for Badger 24/7. This was 12, 13 years ago when I first started. I bumped into the guy running the tournament, and so I used to work at NY2LA Sports. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's kind of similar to Prep Hoops. They run a lot of tournaments, scouting service too. And then I started with him and worked there for about 5 years before I moved over to Prep Hoops.
Gotcha. And by the way, until I was prepping for this, my stats guy Joe Ferguson was helping me out. I thought it was 247 Badgers, and I thought there were specific Badgers that you were talking about. So this is always a good education process for me when I talk to people to learn specifically what those names get to. So this is a perfect time. I'm just gonna lay it out there. Greg Gard, basketball recruiting. This is a big season for Wisconsin. I know you're not a fan, but you cover them, so you have opinions, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Greg Gard so good at recruiting in Minnesota and so not like he is in Minnesota in Wisconsin? Make me understand that.
Well, I think the big narrative we need to crush with basketball recruiting, and I've tried this many times. It doesn't get through to a lot of people, but I mean, this is one of the benefits from my other job. I get to see it from a different perspective. In-state recruiting in basketball does not exist. Now, I'm not saying you don't recruit the state. I'm not saying there's not a built-in advantage, but this idea of like a wall that you built when you took over as head coach for Wisconsin isn't going to be there in basketball. AAU is what runs everything in basketball recruiting. It's not necessarily location. So you ask, why does Wisconsin do so well in Minnesota? Well, Greg Gard's been recruiting Minnesota for 30 years. That's where he was recruiting when he was an assistant. He's got more relationships there than he might have in Wisconsin at this point from an AAU perspective. So if and I always say this, you look at who does Wisconsin get and what AAU programs do they come from? AAU, and if you don't have a relationship with that program, you're likely not getting that kid. Wisconsin's got deep ties in the two big programs in Minnesota, D1 Minnesota and Howard Pulley. And that's why you're seeing these kids come here, that they get a jump on these recruitments early. Their coaches are helpful in getting the kids on visits. And that's not necessarily true with every program in Wisconsin. And there's about
the Playground Warriors, right? The Playground Warriors, is that the preeminent?
It's Playground Club now.
Okay.
Who ran it passed away roughly 2 years ago. Yeah, and him and Greg Gard were very close, and that's another feeder program for Wisconsin.
Gotcha.
But they combined with Playground Elite, who was out of Milwaukee, so now the Playground Club. Wisconsin still has a pretty good relationship with Ike Wilson. So you'll still see them recruit that program very hard, but that was a little bit different deal there when Richie Davis was still with us. But so I always say this: don't get invested in recruiting the state of Wisconsin. If you want a state to worry about Minnesota. That's what I've always said.
I absolutely understand that, and I have the feeling that despite your very impressive efforts to try and explain that, I still think Wisconsin basketball fans are still going to go, what, and that's nothing you can control about that. People are going to feel the way they feel. But this segues nicely into my next question. 23 class, 24 class. What's your perspective on how those classes are shaking out. I mean, obviously 23s, they're players now. And I had them on the show recently, some great kids. But how 24, obviously the sort of, elephant in the room is Kon, and whether, that deal is going to be sealed doesn't seem to be trending in a great direction. But what are your thoughts on those classes?
Yeah, and it's 2024 is solid. I think Wisconsin would love to get it, a real highlight, top of the board guy like Kon to kind of put the icing on the cake. If they don't, I still think they're okay. I mean, Daniel Freitag has got a chance to be, what Chucky Hepburn is to Wisconsin. He was arguably the top player on Wisconsin's board. He was a guy they offered before Kon Kneuppel, if I'm not mistaken, as well. I mean, they're absolutely in love with him. I know he's faded a little bit in the rankings, which is kind of perks some ears a little bit. But you got to remember now that he's dropped football and focusing solely on basketball. I think you'll see more of him in terms of what made him a high 4-star. Maybe I think he was even top 50 at one point or early in his recruitment. So he's got a chance to be really special. Jack Robeson out of Lakeville, who if that city sounds familiar to Wisconsin fans, it should.
Oh yes,
really clean up in there. Yeah, he's a nice plug and play guy. He's a guy that I think has a really high floor. He'll find his way onto the court in multiple ways. 6'6", 6'7", kind of maybe doesn't do anything at an elite level, but does everything well. Very versatile defensively, a guy that can score inside and out as well. Probably not number 1 or number 2 scorer at the Big Ten level, but he's kind of one of those guys. I don't want to call him a glue guy, but he's somebody that kind of ties everything together and allows you to make your lineups a lot more versatile. Kneuppel, the thing with this recruitment is everybody thinks they know something, and it's always something different, which kind of tells me nobody knows anything. So I'm not writing off Wisconsin. I know, there was one point the Badgers felt really, really good about getting him. I wouldn't say confidence is anywhere near that high right now. But yeah, I think they're just kind of at the point where, they've thrown everything at him that they can, that they're waiting for an answer. And, that's maybe why confidence has faded a little bit here. I think they thought maybe he'd commit after that unofficial in June. And once he didn't, I think there was kind of a little bit of a gulp. So he's got 2 more officials here. We'll see. I know staying close to home is still going to be a big deal in the end, but I worry because, I know what's going to happen on Twitter, social media, and message boards if Kon Kneuppel doesn't go to Wisconsin, and it's gonna be bad for Greg Gard, even though he's got 2 guys that he targeted very early and got in this class, and this 2023 class looks like it could be pretty solid too if you believe the rumblings inside the program, but they do need a heavy hitter like Kon. I mean, let's face it, they do need somebody like that to help them get them over the top. And, it would be somewhat of a failure if I know I don't play the in-state angle a lot, but given, what we know about this recruitment, it would be somewhat of a failure if they weren't able to keep him.
Yeah, I mean, it would go a long way towards reinforcing what we just talked about not being able to land the big-time Wisconsin players. But I will say this. I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding what you are putting down here, Wisconsin is in the race. I know a report came out a few weeks ago and said, it's basically Duke or Virginia. Is that was that kind of put the I don't know. I don't put a lot of stock in it. And it's not the source. I don't begrudge the person.
I mean, it could be like I said, but when I reach out or people reach out to me, it's always, I've heard every school's in front. A couple of weeks ago, Duke was worried about Wisconsin. They thought he was going there. I mean, it's a recruitment around a 5-star who keeps things close to the vest. I'm not saying don't listen to anything. I'm just saying the information has changed a lot, and this is what it does.
You are Greg Gard, and you have, obviously, that recruiting visits aren't 5 minutes, but make the case for Wisconsin for Kon. I mean, it seems obvious, but what what do you point out there that puts them ahead of a program like Duke that spits guys in the NBA 3 or 4 a year, a program like Virginia that's won a national title recently, despite the fact that their offense is slower than Wisconsin's and they're going to score less? What's the pitch?
Well, aside from the obvious basketball fit, I mean, he is. I've always said this about Kon Kneuppel. If Bo Ryan could create somebody in a lab, this is what it would look like. Just ultra skilled, intangibles through the roof, does everything you want. You don't have to worry about personality, low maintenance. You don't find many 5-stars that are like low maintenance and don't draw attention to themselves. I mean, this is a perfect off and on the floor fit for Wisconsin. If I were recruiting him, how I would pitch it is, you can go to Duke, you can go to Virginia. You're gonna be successful wherever you go, right? Like, I mean, if you're an NBA guy, you're gonna find your way there. You don't need those, but specifically, maybe I don't want to call it negative recruiting, but if you're going against Duke, Virginia's a different animal because they're not a blue blood and they don't produce pros like that. But if I were targeting against Duke, I'd say, you can look at all, even their current NBA guys. I mean, how much does Kyrie Irving or a Jason Tatum really mean to that program? They have so many of them. I don't want to say they're forgotten, but are they legends in Durham? Frank Kaminsky, Sam Decker will never die in Madison.
Yeah.
You do it big here, you're remembered forever. You do it big there, you're remembered for a little bit. And that's the angle I'd try and hit. I'd assure him. I might play the Johnny Davis thing a little bit. This was a high 3-star. Some people had him as a mid 3-star. He became a pro in 2 years. Imagine what we could do with you, who's already tailor-made for our system.
Yeah.
And I would try and play to those strengths. Obviously, Virginia, that I don't know if that works a whole lot because Tony Bennett, as Joe Krabenhoff once told me, he said, I'd let my kids play for Tony Bennett.
Bennett's a good dude. I mean, there's anyone's going to argue that. But if the argument is up-tempo offense,
right,
and and that's, I know that's probably some schools, or the perception at least is that's used negatively against Greg Gard. Wisconsin scores more than Virginia. So, I mean,
it's faster than Virginia too. And that would be the thing. It said, well, why go across the country when you can do the same thing here? Let's just say for the sake of the argument, where Wisconsin goes back to Dick Bennett basketball, why go halfway across the country when you could do the exact same thing here?
Yeah, I agree.
Now,
and look,
Virginia might be better positioned to win a national title than Wisconsin. I don't know what they have coming up, but I mean,
let me play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Let me play devil's advocate. Let's pretend that Purdue knocks off Virginia, as they almost did in that Elite Eight game a few years ago when Virginia went on to win the national title. Take that away, and Virginia has had a preposterously unsuccessful series of NCAA runs lately. And don't get me wrong, Wisconsin wasn't in the tournament last year. I get that, but I mean, and I understand. I don't want to scoff at a national title. That goes a long way in recruiting, but that seems to be the outlier with Tony Bennett. That's not the they're a team that gets overseeded every year, it seems like, and gets knocked off all the time. And again, this isn't negative recruiting. It's a good program, all that. But I think I can make the case that, and you say using Johnny Davis, Tyler Hero is another example. Hero goes to Wisconsin. People, he went to Kentucky. That's why he became a thing in the NBA. Tyler Hero would have been a state legend if he had gone to Wisconsin. That's my perception.
And Tyler Hero, fell in the draft. I mean, Johnny Davis, it wasn't the same apples to apples draft, but, Johnny Davis also went significantly higher, and Tyler Hero's stock, you could argue, dropped. Now, I don't think Wisconsin would have used him in the same way Kentucky did, but I think the argument still stands. At the end of the day, if you're good enough, you're and you put your name out, it's not going to matter where you went to college. You're going to go through the combine. Even if you fall in the draft, your talent will rise at some point. But back on Tony Bennett, another thing I hate about college basketball, especially with, the way arguments I have with fans, they define a season based on the NCAA tournament. And I don't think that's fair or accurate at all. Not saying it's unless you can win a national championship, does it really matter when you get knocked out? I mean, look at 2 years ago. Is somebody going to tell me Iowa State had a better season than Wisconsin, who won the Big Ten because they got to one more game? No. So I mean, Tony Bennett's won ACC titles consistently, which isn't easy to do with Duke and North Carolina there. I mean, he's almost supplanted both, lately as kind of the top dog in that league. He's won 4 of the last 6 regular season titles, if I'm not mistaken. He's also put, a handful of guys in the league, and I think that's starting to become a bigger deal to Kon and his family as well. So that's why I say, Virginia to me is a lot harder to attack than Duke, because
to be clear,
Evan, go ahead.
I was going to say I was kind of laying the devil's advocate argument out about Bennett and success in the NCAA tournament. But the reality is, for the same reasons that I'm not sure how familiar you are with the account, but I have been a pretty big Greg Gard supporter and pointing out the fact that he has 2 Big Ten titles in 4 years and 2 Big Ten Coach of the Year things without having any significant run of NCAA success recently. Although there were 2 Elite Eights that were takes, I think, back in right after he took over from Bo that we should have gotten, or we almost got. That doesn't mean that Greg Gard's not a great coach. That does not mean that Wisconsin is not a successful program. Look, Chucky doesn't get injured against Iowa State. I know it's coulda, woulda, shoulda, but I do believe that's an Elite Eight team that year. So if there's add an Elite Eight to Greg Gard's, certainly Miami was tough, but add an Elite Eight to Greg Gard's recent resume, and those whispers and those same things are certainly diminished.
Right, and he needs a run this year. I'm not going to downplay that, because some of these teams have been too talented not to go farther. You mentioned the 2 Sweet 16 teams. Wisconsin ran into some really tough luck. I mean, didn't play well against Florida at all. Still got the, one of the luckiest shots in program history, and Zach Showalter with a 1-footed flying in 3, only to have it taken away. And they were terrible in that game against Florida. Still found a way to get to overtime. Notre Dame had the lead late, coughed up the basketball a couple times. That one goes away. And like you mentioned, the Chucky Hepburn injury, the bracket kind of cleared out for him too. I think Miami upset somebody. And all of a sudden you're looking at an easy Sweet 16 if you can get past Iowa State. But he needs a run just to not only quiet the crowd, but I think really cement himself as one of the better coaches in the Big Ten from what I think he is. Now, he's had some rough luck early. That whole Bo Ryan thing blew up a bunch of recruiting classes for him. He had a ton of injuries. That one year, the first year they didn't make the tournament. Last year, I don't know how much you want to use Tyler Walls and Max Klesman's injury as a crutch, but they never recovered from it. But for the most part, all of his teams have started really playing better at the end of the year. But at the end of the day, I still think it comes down. Where's Wisconsin as a program? Are they a national title contender? No. You take Big Ten titles when you can get them. Those aren't easy to get, especially with how deep they've won 2 of the 3 when the league's been arguably at its deepest. I don't think you gloss over that at all. At the end of the day, it's about hardware and titles. And if you're getting 2 out of 3, and they got a chance to get 3 out of 4 this year, nobody should seriously be considering running him out of that program.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a pretty good argument, with the exception of Purdue, over the last 5 years or so in the Big Ten. There really wasn't a real national title contender in the conference, despite the depth of the conference. In any given game, a team could win. And the fact that Purdue's our standard bearer, given their recent string of failure in the tournament, that's a little bit disappointing. But that doesn't mean it's not from post to finish a race, an incredibly difficult conference to navigate over the course of a season. Real quick, kind of 150-word thing. What's your expectation for Gard's team this year?
I think top 2 or 3 in the league is realistic. That Illinois team is going to be really tough to knock off with everything they got back, and that's not a great matchup for Wisconsin, as we found out over the last couple years. I can't remember the stat, but Brad Underwood, what have they won, like 6 or 7 in a row against Wisconsin? I forget what the stat was, if it hasn't been done, that streak in the Bo Ryan Greg Gard era, if that's the longest, or it's the longest in a long time. But they've got Wisconsin's number. Purdue will be up there again. Michigan State, Ohio State's got some transfers and a really strong freshman class. I think there's 5 or 6 teams that you're battling. Given that you've got essentially everything back, Connor Sejan's a year better, and generally you make your biggest jump from year 1 to year 2. This team, if they don't compete for a Big Ten title, I'm not saying they have to win it, but if they can't finish top 4 minimum and make a Sweet 16 run in the tournament, then I think it's a failure.
Gotcha. And really quick, we've completely neglected football. I know we're going to get you off in a couple minutes, but just without getting too deep, obviously not the greatest week in program history this past week of the Washington State loss. What is your expectation for the rest of the season for Luke Fickell's crew?
I'm up in the air. I don't know what to think after Washington State. Now, I thought they would beat the Cougars after witnessing the environment. I think I said it to somebody else in the press box. I said if I had walked in here first and seen the student section, I would have picked Wisconsin to lose, because it became a very hostile environment. About an hour before kickoff, it was their Super Bowl. The place was crowded and packed. There was just juice in the air. It had trap game written all over it. Now at the same time, Wisconsin's got some major problems that they need to address on both sides of the ball. Like I said in the preseason, this is not a video game. Is Wisconsin the most talented team in the Big Ten West? Without a doubt. But having it come all together, as we're seeing it, is two different stories. All of a sudden, we're seeing a defense that, it's not necessarily putting fear into opposing offenses. This used to be a defense that dictated everything the offense did. Now you're seeing it the other way around, and Wisconsin's back on their heels. They're not getting plays. Stops behind the line of scrimmage, not getting turnovers, not getting off the field in 3, 4, 5 plays. And you're seeing offenses start to go on cruise control at times against them. Offensively, there seems to be a balancing act that Wisconsin hasn't figured out yet. And, I think maybe one of the biggest concerns going forward is, how do you manage this power run game of Braylon Allen, especially with Braylon Allen, who voiced some displeasure in the media about his workload against Washington State, only getting 7 carries with, what is probably your best weapon, the passing game and all the wide receivers you have, at least in terms of upside and how far this team is going to go. Your best option might be your ability to spread the field and chuck the ball around. And your best player, Braylon Allen, doesn't necessarily fit into the system with what you want to do. Hence, he's got 13 receptions and only 36 yards out of it. He's not necessarily made for this spread up-tempo attack. He's a bell cow, downhill between the tackles guy that's going to wear on you for 4 quarters. Now, he's still Braylon Allen. He's going to have success. He's going to get 12, 13, 1,400 yards by the time this season's over. But I'm starting to wonder, you see Keontae Lewis walk out the door on Thursday for lack of opportunities, 0 snaps against Washington State. Can you keep all these guys happy and spread the ball around enough to make this offense, really work? So the schedule still sets up very nicely, especially if you can beat Iowa at home. Why can't you still get 10 wins? I'm probably backing down on Wisconsin being the favorite to be the Big Ten West, to win the Big Ten West, until I see what they got. Purdue Friday night, which is going to be another hostile environment, potential trap game for them. But the schedule just sets up so nice, and they're so much more talented than the middle and the bottom of the Big Ten West. I think you got to find a way to at least win 9 games.
I feel that too, and I will say, it's tough to know who the favorite is. I'd still say Wisconsin. I will say this about Iowa, though, and their revamped offensive system under the elite Brian Ferentz. They're averaging 22 points a game after 2 games. I will tell you, playing at home against one solid team, and the Iowa State game was on the road, but the first game was at home against some okay team. That offense isn't maybe it's better than it is with Patriots, but it's not. I don't think it's putting fear into the hearts of Big Ten West opponents. I think that defense is still where it's at. I mean, that defense
not, but 17 points in the Iowa-Wisconsin game could be enough to win. I mean, you look at last year. Not that the teams are the same, but all Wisconsin had to do was not shoot themselves in the foot, and they win the game. But that's all they did. I mean, you had to spot Iowa points last year. I think it is a little scary that they can get 2 touchdowns now. It's dumb as that sounds coming out of my mouth.
But it's crazy. It's crazy. But I will say this about Iowa going forward. I mean, that's a team. It's always going to be a tough game.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin's defense, I feel like, and this seems simplistic, but you put Benton and Herbig back in this defense, and it's a totally different defense. It seems like those dudes at those high-level NFL guys who are already getting NFL snaps and pretty good ones, they just simply were not replaced in this year's team. There's no Herbig and Benton, so it's having to be more of a committee thing, and that's going to take some time to develop. That's fair?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's no game wreckers in the front 7. I mean, we knew that coming in, right? We knew the defensive line was going to take a huge step back. I mean, Keanu Benton was everything to that unit. You saw him take on 2 guys and often beat double teams. Even if he did nothing in terms of making a stat, everybody saw the film and Keanu Benton moving guys back into the quarterback and making him uncomfortable, making him move around. I mean, stuff like that doesn't show up in the stat book is just huge. And then Herbig on the edge, in that 3-4 defense, it's a little different now, but, the 3-4, one of the aspects you miss the most is a guy like that simply just got to, that was the playmaker position for that defense. Herbig, Leon Jacobs, Garrett Dooley, TJ Watt, Vince Beagle, whoever it was, got to sit there, pin their ears back and go. And then, that was somebody the offense had to account for every single play. I don't know if they have that guy in the front 7 that, the quarterback's pointing out, okay, we need to get him, we need to chip, we need to put a double. Hunter Wohler is the best player on this Wisconsin defense. Problem, he's at safety, and most of the time he's cleaning stuff up, cleaning mistakes up. You can only play him in the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage or in the box just so much, especially with, some of the big plays you've been giving up over the top. He needs to be on the back end too. So that, it's still the biggest question mark of this team, in my opinion. Can you find guys that are going to be able to penetrate and make plays behind the line of scrimmage? And right now, that's why you're seeing these offenses kind of go on cruise control, because you're not able to slow the tempo on these guys at all.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's a long season. Sometimes there's a game where it starts clicking. I know I've seen that with past Wisconsin teams. I know you've made a good case why this is different than some of them, but the cupboard in some cases may have been a little more bare than people wanted to admit. And getting a new coach or a series of new coaches and a totally new system, which may end up being incredibly successful, they're going to be growing pains. These are the growing pains that I think a lot of people kind of secretly thought were going to happen. So,
well, I think too, I should point at some point, eventually, you hope you have an offense where this isn't a problem. Like I think one of the things I've said, in the preseason is, this defense is going to take a step back, but this isn't old Wisconsin. I mean, you're not hoping you just score 21 and your defense is able to hold it. Eventually, when things come together, whether it's this season or the next, you're scoring 30 plus points, and you don't need your defense to keep you in every single game. And that takes the pressure off that unit quite a bit. So, I mean, even though that's the biggest question mark of this team, I think at some point it's not going to be that big of a deal. Once Phil Longo gets all his guys or in this program, and a couple of recruiting classes later, or maybe even this year if it all comes together, at some point I don't think we're going to care about this defense giving up 3 touchdowns.
Agreed. I'd say I've stressed patience. I did a little bit of a skull session. I said, Null is not lost. That was a tough loss, but it's going to be all right. Our last question, I've always wondered. I know some of your fans and subscribers are wondering this. If you get too many crystal balls wrong, are you given an electric shock by 24/7 corporate?
I've never heard anything about a wrong crystal ball. My biggest problem is so I've stopped doing it because sometimes I just make them on recruits that have nothing to do with Wisconsin. Because, especially when I was younger, I was always about, okay, I want the best percentage and, all just stupid stuff that I don't care about now. And then I'd forget about them, and something would happen, and, it'd switch, and I'd forget that I made them. So now I tend to only make them on Wisconsin targets, and, pretty much when I'm very sure or have a very strong hunch. But no, there's no reprimand for being wrong. You should, if you drop under 50%, though, maybe you should a 2-week non-paid vacation or something like that.
Having to shadow PJ Fleck for 2 weeks. I think they'd probably get it. But
Oh yeah, make me cover Minnesota.
Good stuff. All right, Evan. Well, thank you so much for the time today. I appreciate it. I know this has been the honor of a lifetime for you. I can tell how pumped you are.
I don't do many podcasts.
Well, I appreciate this. Well, we'll see what we
haven't
can
done
do.
one in like, I don't know, a couple months.
Well, we'll see if we can't get literal dozens of people to check this out. It's gonna be fun. But thank you so much for hopping on, and hope Wisconsin we can maybe chat in the winter about Wisconsin landing their prize recruit Kon Kneuppel.
All right, sounds good. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Take care, my man.